The little black girl hid beside a chemical cabinet as someone whispered her name across the dim lab. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to today's story. Imagine a dimly lit lab, the smell of chemicals thick in the air, and a little girl, no older than 8, crouching behind a large chemical cabinet. Her heart is pounding, her small hands shaking as she tries to stay as still as possible. The flickering overhead lights make the shadows dance across the cold, sterile floor. She holds her breath, hoping no one will find her. Every step echoes in the silence, and every whisper in the air makes her jump. Maya. A voice calls her name softly, almost like a breath. Maya's eyes widen, and her entire body tenses. She doesn't move a muscle, hoping against hope that it's just her imagination. But the voice comes again, this time closer, sharper. Maya, where are you? She can feel it now. Someone is close. Her father's new wife had told her she was just being a child when Maya had asked for help, but Maya could sense something was wrong. Something was off with the man she was supposed to trust. And now, she's hiding in this lab, alone, with only the sound of her breathing to keep her company. Maya can't understand why she's here, in this cold lab, hiding from a man who is supposed to protect her. What had happened? The memories of the past few days rushed through her mind in a blur. She had been at home, safe, or so she thought. Her mother was at work, and her father's new wife had asked her to stay in the lab while they discussed something with some guests. That was the last time she saw the safety of her home, the last time she felt normal. The door to the lab had been locked behind her, and soon she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Maya wasn't sure how long she had been hiding, but every moment felt like an eternity. Her hands were sore from gripping the edge of the cabinet. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Sweat dripped down her face. Mixing with the tears, she couldn't hold back any longer. Maya. The voice calls again, just as the door to the lab creaks open. She couldn't stay hidden forever. Her breathing quickens. What should she do? She knew there was no way out. She had no idea who to trust. Her mother wouldn't be able to help, and there was no one else around. She had no choice but to stay quiet, to stay hidden. But what if it was too late? What if someone was already too close? The sound of the footsteps stops, and there is only silence again. Her heart pounds louder in her ears. Should she make a run for it? Should she call for help? Maya's mind races. What will happen next? I had no idea how long I had been hiding behind the chemical cabinet. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I held my breath, trying to remain as quiet as possible. The dim light flickered above me, casting eerie shadows that made the walls seem to close in on me. Every rustle, every sound made my heart race, but the worst was the voice. The voice that kept whispering my name, getting closer with every passing moment. Maya. It called again, and I felt a chill run through me. My eyes darted around the dark room, but I couldn't see anything. I was too terrified to move, to make a sound. I clutched my knees to my chest, my tiny body shaking in the corner, trying to remain as still as possible. Then, there was the creak of the door, and I knew someone had entered the room. I could hear footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving closer. It was him, my stepfather. I had no idea what he wanted, but the way he had been looking at me for the past few days, something wasn't right. I had been hiding from him ever since I realized he wasn't the person I thought he was. I tried to tell Mom, but she didn't believe me. And now, I was alone, trapped in this lab with nowhere to go. I swallowed hard, trying to control my breathing. I couldn't let him hear me. I couldn't let him find me. But my body betrayed me. My chest rose and fell too quickly, my heart hammering in my throat. The footsteps paused, and I held my breath. I could feel his presence in the room now, just a few feet away. I could almost hear him breathing. Maya. He said my name again, and this time, it was so close. It sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't know how much longer I could keep hiding. The silence stretched on, the tension in the air unbearable. Then, a sudden movement. My heart leapt in my chest. I didn't dare move, not even a muscle. And then, in an instant, everything changed. The door slammed shut, and the footsteps disappeared. I blinked, confused. Was he gone? My mind raced as I slowly stood up, inching toward the edge of the cabinet. I peeked out, but the room was empty. He wasn't there anymore. I couldn't believe it. I had expected the worst, but now, I wasn't sure what to think. I didn't trust him, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening. Something bad. But what? I needed to leave this place. I needed to find Mom, tell her what I'd been feeling, what I had seen. Maybe she'd finally believe me. I had to find a way out. I carefully moved toward the door, my heart still pounding in my chest. As I reached for the handle, my thoughts were interrupted by a loud crash. I froze. The sound came from the hallway, followed by shouting. I couldn't tell what was happening, but I didn't want to find out. I needed to get out. I had to run, but I couldn't. My feet wouldn't move. I was frozen, stuck in place. The crash had startled me, but it also made me realize something. I wasn't alone in this fight. Something was happening outside, and I wasn't the only one involved. I had to get to the bottom of this. I had to figure out what was really going on. My head spun with questions, but there was only one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't stay here. I had to leave before it was too late. I stood frozen in place, my hand still gripping the cold doorknob. The crash from the hallway echoed in my ears, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse. What was happening? My heart was racing, pounding in my chest like a drum. I knew I couldn't stay in this lab any longer. I had to get out, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway made me flinch, and I quickly yanked the door open. I had no idea what was happening outside, but I couldn't just sit here and wait. I had to move. I had to find help. I stepped into the hallway, my shoes barely making a sound on the cold, hard floor. I crouched down low, my heart thumping in my chest, and I slowly moved toward the stairwell. I could hear voices, muffled but clear enough to make out. They were arguing. My pulse quickened. Was it him? My stepfather? I had to find out. I needed to understand what was really going on. I carefully moved closer to the voices, my breath shallow and fast. My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them seemed to make sense. I hadn't been wrong before. Something had been off for days now, and it was only getting worse. But how could I explain this to someone? How could I tell them what I was feeling? I had no idea who could help me. I barely knew who to trust anymore. The voices grew louder, and I froze again. This time, I could make out words. Where is she? She has to be here somewhere. A man's voice growled. That was him. It had to be. I couldn't make out the other voice, but it was just as urgent. My stepfather was looking for me. I wasn't sure how long he had been searching for me, but the panic in his voice was real. I couldn't stay here. I had to go. I turned to the stairwell and started running, my feet pounding against the steps. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out from the fear. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't go back to him. I couldn't face him again. I reached the door at the bottom of the stairs, my hand trembling as I gripped the handle. The sound of footsteps behind me made me hesitate for a second, but I pushed the door open and bolted outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, and I gasped, filling my lungs with the fresh air. I couldn't believe I had made it outside, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep running. I glanced around, my eyes darting from one shadow to the next, looking for somewhere to hide. There was a narrow alleyway nearby, just big enough for me to squeeze into. I darted toward it, my heart in my throat. I pressed myself against the wall, hoping no one would find me. I tried to keep quiet, but my body shook uncontrollably. I could feel the panic creeping up on me. I didn't know how long I could stay here, but I knew I couldn't go back inside. I was alone. No one knew where I was. No one knew what had been happening. I was scared, and I didn't know what to do. The footsteps outside grew louder, and my breath caught in my throat. Were they getting closer? I held my breath, trying to stay as still as possible. I couldn't let them find me. Not now. Not like this. But then I heard something else. Voices, distant but familiar. I didn't recognize the words, but the tone was different from the one I had just heard. It was calmer, more reassuring. I dared to peek around the corner, my eyes straining in the darkness. In the distance, I saw something I hadn't expected. Two men, dressed in black, moving quickly and quietly through the alley. One of them had his hand on his phone, and the other was looking around. I didn't know who they were, but they seemed to know where they were going. They weren't looking for me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they might be the help I needed. I held my breath again, waiting for them to pass, and then I made my move. I slowly stood up, trying not to make a sound. The alleyway was narrow, but there was a small gap between the buildings. I squeezed through, hoping to stay out of sight. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I had to keep moving. I didn't know if they were friends or if they could help me, but I had no other choice. I had to trust that they would do something. I just hoped I wasn't too late. I crept forward, my heart still racing, every sound outside amplifying my fear. The two men who had passed by earlier were now out of sight, but the sense of danger never left me. I had no idea what to do next. My body was trembling, exhausted from the adrenaline, but I couldn't stop moving. I was on my own, and the last thing I wanted was to go back inside that lab. It felt like the walls were closing in around me again. I wasn't safe. Not with him, not in that place. I glanced around, looking for anything, any kind of safe space where I could hide. There was a small alley ahead, darker than the rest of the street, and a part of me just knew it was my best option. I needed shelter. I moved toward it as quietly as I could. The sound of my breath was the only thing I could hear now, and every time I took a step, I was sure someone would hear it. When I reached the alley, I pressed myself against the brick wall, trying to keep my presence undetected. It was a narrow space, filled with the smell of damp concrete and forgotten garbage. I tried to steady my breathing, praying that I could just stay unnoticed for a little while longer. The streetlights from a few blocks away barely reached the alley, leaving me in darkness. For a moment, I thought I heard footsteps approaching, my heart clenched in my chest. Were they coming for me? Had they already found me? I held my breath, trying to make myself as small as possible. I could hear the faint sound of sirens in the distance, but that only added to the confusion. What was happening? Where was everyone? I had no idea if anyone was looking for me, or if I was truly alone in this. But one thing was certain. The longer I stayed here, the more I felt trapped. The panic I had been trying to push away started creeping back in, and I fought to keep it at bay. I had to stay calm. I had to think clearly. Just then, I heard a voice. It wasn't the voice of my stepfather or anyone I recognized, but it was close enough to make me freeze. "You out here?" A man called softly from the street. My body went stiff. I knew I had to stay silent, but my thoughts were running wild. Who was that? Was he looking for me? The voice continued, softer this time. "Maya? You there?" It wasn't a threat, not yet, but it made my skin crawl. My heart was beating in my throat. I stayed still, barely breathing, praying that whoever it was would just pass by. But the voice didn't go away. Instead, it seemed to come closer. I didn't move, not an inch. My thoughts raced. Who was calling me? Could they help? Or was this some new danger? The steps grew closer, then stopped. I could feel someone standing right outside the alley, only a few feet away. I held my breath, unable to make a sound. For a moment, there was nothing but the silence of the night. Then, a figure appeared in the light from the street. It wasn't my stepfather. It wasn't anyone I had expected. The man didn't look threatening. He was tall, his face weathered by time, but there was something kind in his eyes. He looked down the alley, and his gaze paused when he spotted me. "Maya, it's okay," he said gently, his voice calming in the stillness of the night. "You're safe now." I stared at him, uncertain, confused, but also desperate for the promise of safety he offered. The way he spoke, the way he stood, didn't feel like a threat. Something about him, something deep inside me, told me I could trust him. I took a tentative step toward him, not knowing if this was a trick or if he truly meant what he said. He smiled, a small, reassuring smile that made the tension in my body loosen just a little. "Come on," he said, extending a hand. "We're here to help." For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. But I didn't know who these people were or how they knew my name. I didn't know if I should trust them, but I also knew that staying hidden in the shadows wasn't going to protect me. My instincts told me to go with him, and I did. I took his hand and stepped out from the darkness, stepping into whatever uncertain future awaited me. Whatever was happening, I couldn't stay in that alley forever. I needed help. I needed to understand what was going on, and maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of finding out. I followed the man through the alley, my heart still pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure where he was taking me or what would happen next, but for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. The shadows of the alley stretched behind me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled away from something dangerous, something I might not fully understand yet. But I trusted him. At least, I wanted to. We reached a beat-up van parked at the end of the alley. The man opened the door and gestured for me to get in. My mind raced with questions. but my body was too exhausted to keep questioning every decision. I climbed inside the van. It wasn't much, old seats, a few empty cans in the corner, but it felt like safety compared to the darkness outside. The man got in next to me, closing the door behind him. "You're safe now," he said again, his voice steady, but I could hear the faint concern underneath. "You're going to be okay, Maya." I nodded slowly, still trying to process everything that had happened. I didn't know this man, didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but I had to believe that he was telling the truth. "How did you know my name?" I asked, my voice small, but it had to be asked. The man looked at me, his expression softening. "We've been looking for you," he said. "I'm part of a group that helps kids in situations like yours. We're here to keep you safe." I didn't understand. A group? What did he mean? I wanted to ask more questions, but my mind was too overwhelmed to form them. Instead, I just nodded, trying to make sense of the situation. The man reached into the front seat and pulled out a phone. He dialed a number and put it to his ear. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could tell he was speaking to someone about me. "She's with me now," he said. "We're heading to the safe house. Keep the perimeter secure." Safe house. That was the first time I had heard those words, and they sent a wave of both relief and anxiety through me. A safe house meant I wasn't going back. I wasn't going back to my stepfather. I wasn't going back to the lab or the fear. But where was I going? I turned to look out the window as we drove, the city lights passing by in a blur. I couldn't recognize where we were. The van took turns down roads I didn't know, and for a while, I just stared at the passing streets, trying to wrap my mind around what had happened. My stepfather. He had to be looking for me. He wouldn't just let me go. The thought of him made my stomach twist. But as the van turned onto a quieter street, my mind shifted back to the man sitting next to me. I had to ask, what's going to happen to me now? I turned to face him, my eyes wide with uncertainty. "You're going to be okay," he said again, his voice reassuring. "We'll get you somewhere safe, and we'll take care of everything. There are people who want to help." The words hung in the air, but they didn't settle the storm in my chest. I wanted to believe him. I had to believe him. But everything was so confusing, and I still had so many questions. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why do you care?" The man's expression softened. "Because everyone deserves to be safe," he said. "Because we don't turn our backs on people who need help. We protect those who are in danger." His words were simple, but they carried so much weight. I wasn't sure what he meant by we, but I could tell he was serious. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to believe that there was someone on my side. The van finally stopped. We were at a small, nondescript house on a quiet street. The man opened the door and stepped out first. He turned to me with a gentle smile. "This is it," he said. "Welcome to the safe house." I stepped out of the van, feeling the weight of everything that had happened finally settle on my shoulders. My legs felt weak, but I walked toward the door, taking one step at a time. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming. It felt like a different world, a place where I wasn't in constant fear. A woman greeted us at the door. She smiled at me, a kind, welcoming smile, and reached out her hand. "Maya, I'm glad you're here," she said softly. "You're safe now. You don't have to worry anymore." I looked at her, unsure, but something in her voice made me believe her. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to hope. This was just the beginning, I knew that. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't running anymore. I was safe. And for now, that was enough. I stood in the doorway of the safe house, still unsure if I could fully believe that I was truly safe. The warmth of the house was comforting, but it didn't erase the fear I had carried with me for days. The woman who had greeted me smiled again, her voice calm and gentle as she stepped aside to let me in. "Come on in, Maya. We've got a lot to talk about, but for now, just take a deep breath. You're safe here." Her words were like a balm to my anxious mind, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that everything was moving too fast. I followed her inside, and the door closed softly behind me. The house was cozy, small, but it felt like a home, a stark contrast to the cold, clinical lab I had just fled. The living room was well lit, filled with soft furniture and plants that added a touch of life to the space. I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion crash over me, but I couldn't let myself relax. Not yet. I needed to understand what was happening, why I was here, and what would come next. The woman led me to the living room, where a man was sitting, waiting for us. He stood as we entered, his eyes scanning me with a careful, assessing look. He didn't seem threatening, but his presence was commanding. He smiled at me, and his voice was steady. Maya, I'm glad you're here, he said. I know this is a lot to take in, but we're here to help. I'm David. He motioned for me to sit down. As I did, he sat across from me, his posture relaxed but attentive. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I just took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Everything was happening so fast, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. The room was quiet for a moment, and I could feel the weight of the questions I needed to ask pressing against me. Finally, I spoke, my voice a little shaky. Why did you help me? How did you know where I was? David exchanged a glance with the woman, who had seated herself beside me. She smiled softly, giving me a reassuring look. We've been keeping track of the situation, she explained. There are people like us who look out for kids in trouble, people who don't have anyone to turn to. We monitor situations like yours and step in when we can. I felt a flicker of relief, but also confusion. Who are you? I asked. What do you mean by people like us? David leaned forward slightly, his eyes warm but serious. We're part of a network, a group of individuals who make sure kids like you aren't left behind. We work in the shadows, keeping kids safe from people who would do them harm. His words were heavy, and as much as I wanted to understand, I felt the need to process it all. It was like I was in a dream, only everything felt too real to be one. But my stepfather, I started, the words catching in my throat. He's still out there. He's probably looking for me. What do I do now? The woman beside me, who I now recognized as Sarah, placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. We've made sure he doesn't know where you are. Right now, the most important thing is that you're safe. We're not going to let him hurt you anymore, Maya. The certainty in her voice made me feel a little better, but the fear still lingered. I couldn't shake the image of my stepfather's face, twisted in anger. I couldn't forget how he had locked me in that lab, how he had been the one who had chased me through the halls, trying to get me back. What if he was close? What if he was already on his way here? I took another deep breath, trying to calm myself. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. David's gaze softened. Now you rest. We'll make sure you're taken care of, and then we'll figure out the next steps. We'll help you get through this. You don't have to face it alone anymore. The way he said it, so matter of fact, made me feel a sense of security I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't have to face it alone. Maybe, just maybe, I could start believing that I was safe. I looked at Sarah, who smiled at me again. We'll be here when you're ready to talk more, but for now, you need rest. You've been through a lot. I nodded, the exhaustion finally catching up with me. I had so many questions, but they could wait. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to close my eyes. I was safe, at least for tonight, and that was enough. I woke up the next morning feeling a strange sense of calm. The warmth of the house wrapped around me, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel the constant weight of fear pressing against my chest. It was quiet, peaceful, and the sun was just beginning to peek through the curtains. I lay there for a moment, letting the silence sink in, trying to convince myself that everything was going to be okay. But then, reality set in. My stepfather was still out there. I could still hear his angry voice in my mind, still see the look in his eyes. He was probably searching for me, and I didn't know where to go next. I couldn't stay in this house forever. I had to figure out what to do. I sat up, glancing around the room. It was small, but it felt like a refuge compared to everything I had just escaped. The walls were painted a soft, calming color, and the furniture was simple but comfortable. It felt like a real home. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't running. But the uncertainty still lingered. I had so many questions. How did these people know I needed help? Who were they? And most importantly, what would happen to me now? I needed to know. I stood up, feeling the weight of the day ahead pressing on me. I had no idea where to start, but I knew I couldn't stay in this room forever. I needed answers. I walked out of the room, down the narrow hallway, and into the living room. The man, David, was sitting at the table, flipping through a notebook. He looked up when he heard me enter, his expression calm but serious. "Good morning, Maya," he said, his voice warm. "How are you feeling?" I shrugged, not sure how to answer. "I'm okay, I guess," I said quietly, avoiding his gaze. I don't know what to do." David closed the notebook and pushed it aside. "I know this is a lot to process, but you're safe here. You're not alone in this anymore." His words were comforting, but they didn't erase the fear gnawing at me. But what happens now? I asked, finally looking up at him. I can't just stay here forever. My stepfather is still looking for me. He won't stop until he finds me. David leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. We're working on that. We've already taken steps to make sure he doesn't know where you are. How do you know? I asked, my voice rising slightly. How do you know he won't find me? David met my gaze, his eyes steady. Because we've been tracking him. We've made sure he can't get to you. We'll keep him at bay. But we also need to figure out what's next for you. You can't stay here forever, but we need to make sure you're safe first. His words sank in slowly, but I still wasn't sure how I felt about it. And what do you mean by what's next? I asked. I don't have anywhere else to go. This is it. David's face softened, and he stood up, walking over to me. We're going to figure out a plan for you. You don't have to face this alone, Maya. We'll make sure you have what you need, and we'll find you a place where you can be safe. I stared at him, still unsure of how to feel. Part of me wanted to believe him, but another part of me was still afraid. Afraid that this was all just a temporary solution. Afraid that I would wake up one day and find everything falling apart again. I didn't want to go back to the lab, back to hiding in dark corners, back to the constant fear. I wanted a life, a future. How do I know I can trust you? I asked quietly. How do I know this is real? David looked at me with a calm, steady gaze. You don't have to trust me right away. But I promise you, Maya, we're here to help. We've been through a lot ourselves, and we understand what it's like to feel alone and scared. You're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out together. I took a deep breath, letting his words wash over me. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. Maybe, just maybe, I could start to trust them. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. I'll trust you. David smiled. And for the first time since I had run from the lab, I felt a small flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I wasn't sure where this journey would take me, but I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't live in fear anymore. The future was uncertain, but for now, I was safe. And that was enough. I woke up the next morning feeling strangely light, like the weight that had pressed on me for days had finally been lifted, if only a little. The events of the past few days played in my mind like a blur, but as I looked around the room, I realized I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't running. I was somewhere safe. The house was quiet, and the soft sound of birds chirping outside drifted in through the window. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was constantly on edge. But the peace didn't last long. I couldn't ignore the reality that my stepfather was still out there, still searching for me. I had no idea where he was or what he was planning, but I knew he wouldn't stop. My mind raced as I thought about what would happen next. What did these people mean by safe house? And what was I supposed to do now? I didn't know where I belonged anymore. The safety they had promised felt fragile, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I might lose it any moment. I stood up, feeling the need to do something, anything, to regain some control over my situation. I walked to the window and looked outside. The world felt different today, but it was still the same world. The same streets, the same houses. Nothing had changed, but everything had changed. I turned around to see Sarah standing in the doorway. She had a soft smile on her face, but there was something behind her eyes, something that told me she understood my fears. Good morning, Maya, she said, her voice gentle. How did you sleep? I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I slept okay, I replied, my voice low. But I still don't understand. What happens now? How do I move on from this? Sarah stepped into the room and closed the door softly behind her. I know it's hard to process, but we're going to help you through it. You don't have to figure it out all at once. Right now, the most important thing is that you're safe. But I can't stay here forever, I said, my voice tight. I can't keep hiding from him. What if he comes for me? What if he finds me? Sarah's expression softened, and she stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You're not hiding, Maya. You're staying with people who care about you, people who are going to make sure you're safe. We've already put protections in place, and we're not going to let anyone hurt you again. Her words brought some comfort, but the anxiety in my chest didn't disappear. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that everything would be okay, but the fear of my stepfather finding me, of him showing up at any moment, gnawed at me. But what if he knows where I am? What if he comes for me, and I'm not ready? I asked, the fear slipping into my voice. Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with compassion. Maya, we're ready. We've already made sure that your stepfather won't be able to track you here. We have people watching over the situation, and we'll keep you safe. But we also need to start thinking about your future. We'll help you get to a place where you can start over, where you can live without fear. The idea of starting over felt impossible. How could I go back to a normal life after everything that had happened? How could I trust anyone again? I don't know how to start over, I whispered, looking down at my hands. I don't know what to do next. Sarah sat down beside me, her presence steady and reassuring. You don't have to know right now, she said softly. But we'll help you figure it out. We'll take it one step at a time. You're not alone in this, Maya. You don't have to face it on your own anymore. I looked at her, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could start over. It was a small hope, but it was something. It wasn't the end of the road. It was just the beginning. Thank you, I said quietly, the words feeling like they came from somewhere deep inside me. Sarah smiled and gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. You're welcome. And remember, you can take all the time you need. We're here for you. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't alone. There was a future ahead of me, one that didn't have to be defined by fear. It was going to be hard, I knew that. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I didn't have to face it alone anymore. And that made all the difference. I sat in the small living room, my mind racing with all that had happened in the past few days. I couldn't fully relax. The calm that Sarah had promised me seemed too fragile, too easily shattered. I kept thinking of him, my stepfather, and the fear that he was out there somewhere, still looking for me. I didn't know how long it would take before he came looking, or if he even knew I was gone yet. I didn't want to keep running, but I didn't want to face him either. I didn't want to go back to that life. As much as I wanted to believe that I was safe, the reality was that I had no idea how to live in this new world that had been thrust upon me. Sarah had told me that things would be okay, that I would get through this, but I wasn't so sure. The idea of starting over, of living without looking over my shoulder all the time, felt impossible. I had no family, no real friends, just the people in this house, and even they were strangers to me. The door opened softly, and I looked up to see David entering the room. He had that same calm, steady look about him, and he closed the door quietly behind him. How are you feeling? He asked, his voice gentle. I didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to say I was fine, that I was safe, but the truth was that I felt lost. I don't know, I said finally. I keep thinking about everything. My life, everything's just so different now. I don't know what to do next. David sat down across from me, his eyes thoughtful. It's okay not to know, he said. You've been through something really traumatic. It's going to take time to process all of this. But you don't have to do it alone. I stared at him, trying to process his words. I don't even know where to start, I whispered. How do I go back to normal after all of this? How do I even begin to trust again? David leaned forward, his expression sincere. You don't have to rush it. Trust is earned, not given. But you've already taken the first step by being here. That's a huge step, Maya. I nodded slowly. The idea of trusting anyone again seemed so foreign, so difficult. I had trusted my stepfather once, and look where that had gotten me. The thought of letting someone else in was terrifying. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't keep living in fear. I needed to make a change. What happens next? I asked, my voice quieter now. What do I do now? David looked at me, his face calm but serious. We'll help you figure that out. First, we make sure you're safe. Then, we talk about your options. You don't have to decide everything today, but we're not going to leave you to face this alone. I swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. It felt like the weight of everything was finally crashing down on me. I had been holding it all in for so long, trying to be strong, trying to make it on my own. But I couldn't do it anymore. I was so tired. I didn't want to be strong anymore. I just wanted to feel safe. David seemed to sense my shift in emotions, and he gave me a small smile. You're not alone in this, Maya, he said softly. We've got your back, every step of the way. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe a little easier. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but at least I knew that I wasn't facing it alone. I could feel the beginnings of a change in me. Maybe, just maybe, I could start to believe that everything would be okay. I still had a long way to go, but for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that my life could be different, that I could find a future where I wasn't running, a future where I wasn't hiding from my past. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. I had a chance, and that chance was enough to start rebuilding, to start living again. It wouldn't happen overnight, but it would happen. And that was all that mattered. I spent the next few days adjusting to this strange new life. The house was quiet, peaceful, and the people here were kind, but every moment was filled with a sense of unease that I couldn't shake off. I had no idea what my future would look like. My past still hung over me, heavy and unyielding, and I knew it wouldn't just disappear. I spent my days mostly in my room, thinking about what had happened, trying to make sense of it all. Every so often, I would hear David or Sarah talking downstairs, but I couldn't bring myself to join them. It was hard to explain, but I still felt like an outsider in my own life. I wasn't sure what to do next. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. One evening, as I sat by the window, lost in thought, there was a knock at the door. I hesitated for a moment, then stood up and walked over to answer it. I opened the door to find David standing there, his usual calm demeanor giving way to something softer. "Maya, can we talk?" he asked. His voice was gentle, but there was an urgency behind it that caught my attention. I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. We sat down in the living room, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. David seemed to be gathering his thoughts. Finally, he looked at me, his eyes steady. "I know you've been through a lot, and I know you're still trying to process everything, but I need you to understand something." I waited, my heart beginning to beat a little faster. What was he going to say? "What you're going through, the fear, the uncertainty, it's all normal," David continued. "But we're not going to let you stay in this place of fear. You have a choice now, Maya. You can choose to let this define you, or you can choose to move forward." His words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know if I was ready to move forward. How could I? How could I just let go of everything that had happened? But at the same time, I couldn't stay stuck in the past. I needed to find a way to live again. How do I move forward? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. David smiled, a small, reassuring smile. "It's not easy. It's never easy. But the first step is accepting that you're not alone. You have people here who want to help you, who are going to help you. You don't have to figure it all out right now. You just have to take that first step." I stared at him, trying to absorb his words. It sounded simple, but it felt like the hardest thing in the world. And what if I'm not ready? What if I never feel ready? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "That's okay," David said. "You don't have to have all the answers today, but you can take one step at a time. No matter how small. Just one step. That's how you start moving forward." I felt a lump form in my throat, and for the first time in days, tears began to well up in my eyes. I had been holding everything in for so long, trying to be strong, but I couldn't anymore. The weight of everything was too much. "I don't know if I can do it," I whispered. David's expression softened, and he reached out to place a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone," he said. "We're here for you. You have a whole team behind you, Maya. You just need to trust us, trust that we'll be here every step of the way." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. I wasn't alone. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could start to heal. It wasn't going to happen overnight. I knew that, but I didn't have to face it alone. I had people who cared about me, who were willing to help me pick up the pieces. "Okay," I said, wiping my eyes. "I'll try." David smiled, his eyes full of understanding. "That's all we ask. Just take it one step at a time." I took a deep breath, feeling a little lighter. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me hope. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could face it. I didn't have to let the fear control me. I could move forward. And maybe, just maybe, I could start to find myself again. I woke up the next morning feeling a little different. The weight of yesterday's conversation with David had settled in, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of hope. The idea of moving forward wasn't as impossible as it had seemed just a few days ago. I had taken my first step, and it felt like I was slowly starting to reclaim control over my life. The house was quiet when I woke up, a stark contrast to the constant tension that had followed me for so long. I sat up in bed and stared out the window, the sunlight filtering through the curtains. A family now, even if it wasn't the one I had expected. "We're going to start figuring things out today," Sarah continued. "I know you're still processing everything, but it's time to look at what comes next." I swallowed hard. The thought of the future was still overwhelming. I wasn't sure I was ready to face it, but I knew I couldn't keep hiding forever. I needed to move forward, even if it was just one small step at a time. "What do we do first?" I asked, my voice quiet but steady. Sarah thought for a moment before answering. First, we're going to make sure you have everything you need. After that, we can start talking about your options. You deserve a chance to rebuild your life, Maya, and we'll help you do that. Her words were kind, but they carried a sense of purpose. For the first time in days, I felt like there was a plan, like I wasn't just drifting through this. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Thanks, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know what I would do without you. Sarah placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch comforting. You don't have to do this alone. We're family now, and we'll always be here for you. As we walked downstairs, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The weight of my past wasn't gone, but it didn't feel as suffocating anymore. I was beginning to believe that maybe I could have a future outside of fear. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of simple, yet important tasks. Sarah made sure I had everything I needed, clothes, food, and a safe place to stay. As the day went on, I felt myself relax just a little more. The uncertainty that had plagued me for so long was still there, but it no longer felt like a constant, looming shadow. David joined us later, and we spent some time talking about my options. He explained that there were places where I could go to get help, places that could offer me a fresh start, away from the past that had been haunting me. We've been in touch with some people who specialize in helping kids like you, David said. They'll be able to guide you, help you get the resources you need. You don't have to make any decisions right now, but we want you to know that there are options. I nodded slowly, feeling a mix of relief and fear. I wasn't sure what any of this meant for me yet, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over what happened next. I wasn't just waiting for things to happen to me. I could make a choice. As the day drew to a close, I found myself sitting outside, the cool evening air brushing against my face. The sun had set, and the stars were just beginning to appear in the sky. For the first time in days, I wasn't worried about what was coming. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the fear to come crashing back in. I didn't know how long this peace would last, but for now, it was enough. I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing myself to simply be in the present. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, and that was more than I had before. I was taking the first step toward a new life, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me. Not anymore. I woke up the next morning with a new sense of determination, but also a deep sense of uncertainty. The night before had been peaceful, but I knew it was just a small moment of calm before what came next. It had been days since I ran away from the lab, days since I left everything behind, and though I was safe for now, I couldn't escape the weight of the question, what happens next? I had spent so long running, hiding, trying to survive, that the idea of living without fear felt strange. David and Sarah had made it clear that I had options, but I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. My mind was racing with thoughts about my stepfather, and whether he was still out there looking for me, and whether I could ever feel truly safe again. I was sitting in the living room when Sarah walked in with a warm cup of tea. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice calm and understanding. I glanced up at her, trying to smile, but failing to fully hide my worry. "I don't know," I said, my voice quiet. "I keep thinking about the future, about what's next. I don't want to keep hiding, but I don't know if I'm ready to move forward either." Sarah sat down next to me, her expression sympathetic. "I understand," she said gently. "You've been through so much. It's okay to feel uncertain, but you're not alone in this. We'll help you figure it out, step by step." I nodded, but the doubt still lingered in the back of my mind. I wanted to believe her, but a part of me was still scared. What if I couldn't move on? What if I was forever defined by my past? Sarah seemed to sense my thoughts. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," she continued. "The most important thing is that you're safe. We're going to help you take control of your life, one step at a time." "But how do I even start?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do I live without fear?" Sarah smiled softly. "It's not going to happen all at once. But each small step you take is one less thing to fear. You've already taken a big step by being here, by deciding to let us help." Her words lingered in my mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't have to have it all figured out. Maybe it was okay to just take things one day at a time. I took a deep breath and glanced out the window. The sun was shining, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a reminder of what I had lost. It felt like a promise of what I could gain. The door opened, and David stepped in, his face serious but kind. "Maya," he said, his tone warm. "We need to talk about what comes next." There's a place we can take you. A place where you can start over, away from everything you've been through. We've been in touch with people who specialize in helping kids in situations like yours. I looked at him, uncertainty flooding back. A new place? I asked. But what about my stepfather? What if he finds me there? David nodded. We've already taken steps to make sure he can't track you. This place is safe, and we've got the resources to help you get settled. The idea of leaving this house, leaving everything behind again, made me feel sick. But at the same time, the thought of staying here forever, hiding, didn't feel like living. It felt like waiting. And what happens after that? I asked, the fear still holding me back. What if I'm not ready? You don't have to be ready, David replied, his voice steady. You just have to take that first step. We'll be with you every step of the way, helping you get to a place where you can start rebuilding. You don't have to face this alone. I sat in silence, letting his words sink in. I wasn't sure I was ready for what was ahead. But one thing was clear. Staying here, living in fear, wasn't an option anymore. I had to take that first step, even if I didn't know where it would lead. I stood up, feeling a rush of emotion. Okay, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I'll go. I'll take the step. David and Sarah smiled, a look of relief crossing their faces. We're proud of you, Maya, Sarah said softly. This is the start of something new for you. I looked out the window again, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. It wasn't the end, but it was a new beginning. I wasn't sure where it would take me, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to find out. I wasn't running anymore. I was walking forward, one step at a time. I woke up the next morning with a quiet determination. The sun was already up, casting soft light through the curtains. I had made the decision to leave the safe house, to take that first step toward whatever came next. It wasn't easy to wake up and face the reality that my life was about to change, but there was a sense of peace I hadn't known for a long time. The fear that had followed me for so long was still there, but it was quieter now, buried under the knowledge that I had a chance at something better. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, but for the first time, I wasn't running away. I was walking towards something new. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the quiet street. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I wasn't alone in this. David and Sarah had made that clear. They would be with me every step of the way. There was a knock at the door, and I turned to see Sarah standing there. She smiled when she saw me, her eyes full of encouragement. Ready? She asked. I nodded, my throat tight, but I could feel my heart beating a little faster with anticipation. I think so. Sarah stepped into the room and handed me a small bag. This is for you, she said. We've arranged everything. You don't have to worry about a thing. I looked at the bag, then back at her, still feeling unsure. What's next? What happens now? Now, we move forward, Sarah replied. You've got a fresh start, Maya. We've found a place for you, a safe place where you can begin again. She reached out and gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. You've taken a big step already. Don't forget that. I took the bag, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It represented the new life ahead of me, a life that was no longer defined by fear. I walked with Sarah down the hall to the front door. The moment I stepped outside, I was hit with the fresh air, and it felt like a small promise. The world was still big, still unknown, but it wasn't as terrifying as it once seemed. We got into the car, and as we drove through the streets, I couldn't help but glance around, taking in the ordinary sights of the city. It wasn't the world I had known, but it was a world that was mine to explore now. The car came to a stop in front of a small building. It was modest, but there was something about it that felt warm, welcoming. Sarah turned to me with a smile. This is it, she said. This is your new beginning. We got out of the car and walked to the door. I paused for a moment, standing in front of it. I wasn't sure what lay behind it, but I knew it was a step forward, and that was all I needed to know. With a deep breath, I opened the door. Inside, the place was cozy, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture. There were people waiting for me, people who were here to help, who had been through their own struggles and understood what I was facing. They greeted me warmly, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I wasn't alone anymore. The future wasn't guaranteed, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't terrified of what it held. I had made it this far, and I was going to make it further. I was ready to start living again. The road ahead would be difficult, but it wouldn't be as lonely as it once felt. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew I had the strength to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, I could see a future where I wasn't just surviving. I was living, and that was enough for now. In this gripping journey of survival and hope, Maya's life takes a dramatic turn after fleeing from her troubled past. As she seeks refuge and safety, she finds herself facing a new world filled with uncertainty, but also a chance for a fresh start. The events unfold with twists and turns that draw parallels to the most intense Hell Angel stories, where loyalty, strength, and survival become the guiding forces in moments of despair. As Maya moves forward, she learns to trust again, finding solace in the support of strangers who become her new family. From fear to freedom, this story resonates with themes commonly found in Hell Angel stories, where personal growth and redemption pave the way for new beginnings. With each step, Maya confronts her past, embracing the opportunity to rewrite her future. This powerful tale not only mirrors the gritty, raw nature of Hell Angel stories, but also highlights the resilience of the human spirit, showcasing how even in the face of overwhelming challenges, survival and hope remain paramount. Maya's journey teaches us that, like the protagonists in Hell Angel stories, we all have the power to overcome and rebuild when given the right support and determination.